And for more on the repatriation of the passengers and crew of the MV Hondius, I can welcome Muhammad Munir, who is Professor in Virology and Viral Zoonosis at Lancaster University. Good morning, Professor Munir, and thank you for joining us. World Health Organization General Secretary Tedros praised Spain for its handling of the repatriation. Would you agree with his assessment?
I think it was certainly a very critical moment because that was, I call it a crucial juncture and a Rubicon moment, because that is a particular stage when, if it is executed properly, the further spread of the infection can be stopped quite effectively. And I think the way it has been orchestrated, the way it has been performed, I think the chances for the virus, at least during this repatriation process and this embarkment processes, has been very low. So overall, I am very pleased with the overall operation up until now, that there has not been any significant spread of the infection from the initial point.
Now, those being repatriated will be placed in quarantine, at least in most countries. France is also to place 22 contacts of a carrier of the virus in quarantine. Can you tell me more about how this quarantine might proceed and how long it would take?
Yeah, when we talk about the hantaviruses, there are a few very unique characteristics compared to the other infection, for example, COVID. And one of the characteristics is that only people who are showing clinical sign, they are the one who are likely to spread the infection. For example, a person who is maybe infected and is not showing clinical sign, is asymptomatic, cannot spread the infection. And that is in complete contrast to COVID-19. In COVID, people who are having no symptom, they could have still spread the infection. So this is a critical aspect when it comes to the hantavirus. Another aspect is that it has relatively long incubation period, which is the time from a person infected to the time when it starts showing clinical signs. Since it is long, is up to 2 months, literally 8 weeks, that means that the person might be, clear of the infection at this moment. Maybe the assays and the tools that are used to detect the infection is not being detected at this moment. But in 2 months' time, or up until 2 months' time, the person starts showing clinical signs. So this prolongs the self-isolation or quarantine period, which add, of course, a further complexity. But the way it is being done up until 42 or 45 days, depending on different countries, it is quite effective way of monitoring the infection should it develop in any of the person.
Now, the MV Hondius set sail from Argentina last month, and Argentina has reported a rise in hantavirus cases. How concerning is the outbreak in Argentina?
I think this is, Olivier, the most important question, because at this moment, we do not really know what is the origin of this outbreak, what is the origin of this particular Handius strain. However, the genetic data of the virus clearly indicates that those two people, the couple in the beginning who unfortunately died, they might have caught this infection at the bird watching trip in during their time before actually coming onto the ship. So because of that genetic information availability, we are almost certain that that is where it has originated. So since the hantaviruses, particularly the Andy strain, which is what we call American type of the hantaviruses, these are very common, is endemic actually in Chile and Argentina. So therefore, I think the important aspect is to look into how much are the viruses out there, people who are coming in contact with those people who would otherwise, maybe other cruise ship would be, sailing from that route. So avoiding the initial incursion of that outbreak is the most critical part.
Now, this is not the first time that cruise ships have been the centre of viral outbreaks. What makes them particularly vulnerable?
You're absolutely right. We literally, in a year, we have like a dozen of different norovirus outbreak in cruise ship. Diarrhea is one of the most common outcome of the people who go on cruise ship trips. And I think one of the particular characteristics of the cruise ship is that it's a quite conducive environment. It's a quite confined enclosement, is because people are less likely or spend very little amount of time out in the open air because of the cold, windy, and all of that. So people people normally stay inside their cabins, and even if they come out of the cabins, the overall area, for example, for the refreshments, for play, all is indoor. It's a quite confined area. So you can imagine that if there is any contamination in the environment onto the air, all is going to be inhaled inside those play areas and the other activities. So therefore, the chances for the spread of this infection and other infection within the cruise ship environment are always higher than outdoor.
Now, the French national who has tested positive was reportedly told by the onboard doctor that her symptoms were merely anxiety. Is there a possibility that perhaps quite a lot of general practitioners are not familiar enough with the symptoms to detect it?
That is, again, Oliver, a very important question. Let me make it clear that all those people who were on the ship, they were being assessed and tested for rapid test or based on the clinical sign. There was no any advanced testing system onto the ship. Therefore, to confirm somebody before they start showing clinical sign was not possible. So now people are being disembarked and repatriated onto their countries. Now they can be tested for more advanced specific tests. Those are meant to detect these infection, even if the infection is at a low quantity. So therefore, all previous assumptions of the hantavirus is based on the history. So whoever tell whatever they are feeling, based on that, physicians were making the decisions. But now, because we have access to the PCR, which is one of the tests people use in the laboratory settings for confirmation of the test, so now it is becoming more evident. So there are likelihood that people who otherwise are considered like, okay, stress, it may be some sort of, anxiety around the whole scenario, that is why they are showing these signs. But now, because the test is becoming more common and will be applied, there will be more tests, unfortunately, being detected positive for these people.
Now, health authorities say that the likelihood of an epidemic and also a pandemic is low. But even if this is the case, what might the worst case scenario be, in your opinion?
I agree that this is not going to be a COVID-style pandemic again, because of few characteristics of this particular virus. One is relatively difficult to spread from one person to another person. Secondly, relatively longer incubation period of time, and so on. But I think one of the aspect that is the most critical at this moment is that how quickly, effectively, these people who have been repatriated are tested and cleared negative and let them go out. So you can imagine, because of this longer period of incubation, around 2 months, if there has been any weaknesses, there have been any negligences over there, or no compliance to the self-isolation, people can go out into the general public without, clearing the infection. And that would be the time when it would start spreading within the people. But again, having said that, even if it spread a little further, which it would, unfortunately, it's not going to be a major pandemic.
Thank you very much for that. Muhammad Munir, Professor in Virology and Viral Zoonosis at Lancaster University.
Thanks.